good afternoon, everyone. And that thumbs up means we are live on camera. So I want to first welcome everyone in the room, but importantly, welcome everyone that's also joining us virtually. It's a real pleasure to welcome you here on behalf of the U.S.-India Business Council and the Hudson Institute. My name is Amy Hariani. I'm a senior advisor at the U.S.-India Business Council at the Chamber of Commerce. I first want to thank the Hudson Institute, Arthur, Aparna, and the rest of the folks here, Morgan, for partnering with us. It's great to be here, and I promise to make AI sound a lot more interesting, or at least a lot less like science fiction than maybe some of you think it is. And so, I have to say, as a political science major and a philosophy major turned lawyer, at first, AI seemed something that was a little like sci-fi out in the future, but it's actually part of our real present today. We're using it in everything. I'm going to talk about some of the companies, actually almost all of the companies we work with are now employing AI, and how if you are not up to speed on its incredible capabilities and technology, we need to do that. We need to help you do that quickly. I'm also pleased that Hudson approached us last year about doing this joint program because USIBC launched our AI task force in April of this year. And the task force is mainly to drive priorities, coordinate policy, and bring government and private sectors together, both in the US and India, on AI policy, technology development, and commercialization. In addition, we use our AI task force platform to discuss the business environment vis-a-vis market access, government and private sector initiatives, promoting policy alignment and growth, and the importance of the growth in this sector between the US and India. And today's event is actually our sixth event or meeting on AI, and comes on the heels of several important engagements USIBC has had on this important topic, including earlier this week with Dr. Seth Senner from the State Department, where we hosted him in Bengaluru. But also in September, we hosted the MIAT Additional Secretary Singh, Senior Advisor at the U.S. Department of State, Eric Smith, and others. I could go on and on. So if you or your company is not engaged on the AI task force with USIBC and you want to, let me know, because we are an active group meeting regularly and hosting events both in India here and virtually. So let me just start by framing a little bit of today's discussion, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pandey, who's going to moderate it today. But the U.S. and India are uniquely positioned to lead on AI, really uniquely positioned, because between the two of us, we have the tech, the talent, and let's be honest, the sheer brain power or the people to shape the future. And if you combine Silicon Valley's innovation with Bengaluru's coding genius, it's like putting Einstein and Newton together. It's a real good combination. So I'm excited. I hope you guys are all excited about the potential that AI, how US and India are going to collaborate on AI. So I mentioned at the beginning that we're seeing AI in virtually all of our companies, and it's not just reshaping our industries, but also supercharging the work that everyone is doing. We're seeing it in healthcare, defense, agriculture, beyond. AI is really becoming the ancillary assistant and promotional tool that all of our companies are using. And we are truly excited that the US and India share a lot in common on its vision. Let's talk about numbers for a moment. By 2030, AI is expected to contribute nearly $15 trillion to the global economy. That's a huge number, and AI has the potential to make our businesses way more competitive, productive, and innovative. And at the Chamber of Commerce and USIBC, we like to say that AI isn't just a turbocharger for growth, it's a real tool for our companies to accelerate to the next level. It's helping companies scale faster, innovate better, and meet the needs of the economies, and importantly, in certain sectors of the economy, underprivileged and those that are less connected. But of course, with great power comes great responsibility, and as my kind of pre-tween son would say, it's cool, but we got to be really careful, and he's right. So I think we need to also talk about what an AI-driven future would look like and ensure that innovation is balanced with some ethical considerations. Things like data privacy, fairness, and transparency can't take a back seat to these discussions. In the US and in India, we're having similar discussions on our AI missions. India's AI missions have set goals that are ambitious and reflect the country's dedication to being a leader in this space. It aims to strengthen the innovation ecosystem, build a public AI compute infrastructure of over 10,000 GPUs, and develop indigenous foundational models. India and the US's approach will not just focus on regulating the technology itself, but on use cases. Nuanced, risk-based approach aligns with voluntary industry-led commitments being advocated as we are here in the US, but also on global initiatives like the Global Partnership for AI. The cross-border collaboration is critical because we know that India's AI startups are innovating at an extraordinary pace, especially in areas like SaaS, health tech, fintech, and AI for social good. Lastly, USIBC and the Chamber have taken a proactive stance on AI regulations, emphasizing a risk-based regulatory framework. Our approach is designed to balance the potential benefits of AI with the need to address its risks and ethical concerns. We advocate for regulations that focus on the level of risk associated with different AI applications. So you can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach. And rather than imposing excessive and broad requirements, we believe that targeted rules should address the trade-offs in specific AI use cases. So I would love, and I hope we can talk more about that today and get into that. So when it comes to AI governance, as you can see, the US-India partnership and our shared democratic values are in a prime position to set the global standards, and that's why we're meeting here today. So as we kick off today's discussion, let's remember we're really at a dawn of a new era, and we're talking about something really fun and cool that we're all going to have a part in shaping. I want to thank again the Hudson Institute for hosting us, and I'd now like to turn it over to Dr. Aparna Pandey, who will moderate the conversation. Dr. Pandey is a research fellow at the Hudson Institute, and her major field of interest is in South Asia, with a special focus on India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, foreign policy, and security. So Aparna, over to you, and thank you so much for bringing us together today.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks to the USIBC for partnering with Hudson. It's a pleasure to sort of have such a great panel with us today. I'll introduce the panelists, and then we'll have a few rounds of conversations. Honorable to my immediate left, sort of physically, not ideologically, Honorable Manisha Singh is Principal, Sunstone Strategy Group, and Senior Fellow for AI at the Crack Institute for Tech Diplomacy. Prior to that, she was Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs at Department of State. Dr. Ajay Kumar is Minister of Commerce at the Embassy of India. With over 2 decades in the Indian Foreign Service, Dr. Kumar has also served in Egypt, Sudan, and Nepal. Nicholas Bramble is Head of Economic Policy at Google. Prior to that, he served as Presidential Innovation Fellow with US Department of Treasury and also taught at Yale Law School. And at the extreme left, but is my Hudson colleague, is Dr. Arthur Herman, Senior Fellow, Director of the Quantum Alliance Initiative. He's the author of 9 books, including actually my favorite, Gandhi and Churchill, the epic rivalry that destroyed an empire and forged our age, and was the finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2009. And Arthur also served on the National Security Council in 2020-2021. I'd like to sort of, I'm going to pose a series of questions to each of you, but please, others are welcome to pitch in if they would like to add on to those questions or disagree vehemently with the response. Manisha, I'll start with you. And I'll ask you to don your former assistant secretary hat and say, how do you envision AI shaping the future of economic growth in both countries? And in particular, which industries do you see benefiting the most from AI, both in India and US?
Well, Aparna, thank you so much for that question. And I want to thank USIBC and Hudson Institute for holding this very timely panel. As we have seen, this year has been monumental in terms of developments in artificial intelligence. If we go back to the spring, the United Nations itself passed a resolution on artificial intelligence. And of course, as expected, the United Nations membership wants AI to track the development goals, wants it to be inclusive, economically inclusive, look at climate issues. All of the broader goals of the United Nations were incorporated into this resolution, which was proposed by the United States but unanimously agreed to by every single member state of the UN. And for those of you who know multilateral diplomacy, that is virtually impossible. Someone always has some issue with a language, with the concept, but this was unanimously agreed to. So I think that's an interesting start for the year and an interesting umbrella where we look at the developments of global AI. And then the European Union itself, as it is prone to do, put out a massive piece of legislation, 458 pages, called the EU AI Act. And the interesting thing about EU legislation is, of course, it does not only have jurisdiction over artificial intelligence initiatives and companies in the EU, but it has extraterritorial reach. So that means US companies like Google have to closely monitor that legislation as well. Similarly, turning to India, any companies that are doing business outside of India, whether in the US or the EU are similarly going to be impacted by this legislation. So it's an overreaching step. I think where the US and India are very similarly situated and are poised for a great level of cooperation is in terms of the approach to regulation. On the one hand, we have the EU, which tends to over-regulate everything, and then you have some jurisdictions which may not have even thought about regulation yet. The US and India have both adopted an approach which entails safeguarding the public and privacy without hampering innovation. At the State Department, we always used to say we want to utilize light touch regulation. Again, consumer privacy, consumer security, and safety are paramount. But we think that in the US, a framework can be adopted which safeguards all of these things that we would like to do without unduly hampering innovation. The greatest developments in technology have of course, come out of Silicon Valley. And there are many cities besides just Bangalore and Bengaluru and Hyderabad in India, which I think similarly have produced quantum amounts of not just technology, but human capital. If you think about the technology talent that comes out of India, I think it's easy to say that it is unmatched anywhere in the world. I think one of India's best exports to the United States is this human capital, this brain power, which contributes and powers Silicon Valley itself. So, as Amy mentioned in her introductory comments, there's a melding there. And I think if we broaden out to the bigger picture US-India relationship, there's so much more economic and strategic cooperation going on. So Prana, to directly address your question about which industries will be shaped and changed, I think it's a matter of how an industry will be shaped by artificial intelligence. At this point, it's safe to say that every single industry, whether it's healthcare or energy or strategic cooperation, the defense industries, every industry has the potential to be affected in a very positive way by artificial intelligence. We, as the human designers of intelligence and the policymakers that are shaping the guardrails around artificial intelligence, have to make it our responsibility to make sure that it is safely, securely, and effectively deployed. I don't think of artificial intelligence as something that's going to replace humanity. Rather, it's going to augment our thought processes, make us more efficient, and make us better able to set out to accomplish the goals in any industry.
Thanks, Manisha. Ajay, what opportunities do you see, especially, as Minister of Commerce at the embassy in here, for India and US to collaborate on AI innovation, tech development? How can both countries leverage what Manisha just talked about, the fact that there's collaboration, there's syncing, there's human capital. How can both countries leverage this to deepen their partnership?
Thank you, Aparna. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Hudson Institute and USIBC to do today's panel discussion on AI. And as the topic says that AI for economic growth, And as Manisha has already said that this last year has been extremely transformational when we talk about the economic opportunities basically. And AI has been actually shaping these opportunities forever kind of. And then they are actually shaping to the extent that every aspect of human life is being actually now currently touched by the AI applications. So, before I actually get to India-US opportunities, let me talk a little bit about the framework what we have actually been actually developing in India. Basically, we have actually created early on National AI Portal. Then we have in 2018. Then we have actually put together National AI Strategy, and early this year. In March, basically, our cabinet actually approved $1.2 billion funding over the next 5 years to create some of the basic critical infrastructure to support AI innovation in India. And when we talk about developing some of those critical infrastructure for supporting AI innovation in India, we early on felt that there is a huge need for actually developing compute capacity for AI related work. So as Amy has already said in her opening remarks that Government of India is actually trying to put together 10,000 GPUs basically, and particularly in collaboration with the government and private sector partnership basically. And when I say private sector partnership, we are absolutely looking forward to have the collaboration not only from the India's private sector, but private sector from all over the world. And of course, US is one of the most critical partner in this entire partnership. So that said, of course, developing some of the data sets in India, developing some of the foundational models in India, then some of the AI application tools basically. And again, skilling is a major element where a lot of commitment is there from Government of India in terms of supporting financially to not only educational institution but also to actually support such projects which are brought by the private sector. If those projects, those models have a possibility of actually changing the people's life basically. So, and the critical aspect in India's AI mission is to actually see how we can actually develop safe and secure AI models, but at the end of the day, it should also make the difference in people's lives basically. So that said, let me talk about a little bit on India-US collaboration. I think we all have seen that 2023 has been transformational in our relationship. Both the governments have launched this ISET. These ISET has already met twice basically, and then we have also launched this INDESX for defense and aerospace innovation ecosystem. Then we have seen Honorable Prime Minister's visit in June last year, and again this year also, this month only basically. So we have just completed last month basically. So we have a huge amount of opportunities for collaboration in our two countries. As Manisha has already said that while US is having so much of technological advantage, the India has the advantage of one of the world-class talent pool. And what we need to do, we need to actually converge our two comparative advantage to actually put them together for use for business, creating business opportunities, for creating societal opportunities for changing people's lives basically. When it comes to some of the sectors where AI applications are actually can be actually put to use in our partnership basically, of course, education sector is one where we strongly feel that we can make disruptive developments in a sense that how we can actually fill that literacy gap in India, even digital gaps in India. When it comes to healthcare, there are so many applications being developed nowadays by private sector, by startups, entrepreneurs, to actually see how we can actually leverage to provide the healthcare to people who actually need it, basically. Then we also have a number of entrepreneurs or startups actually currently putting together AI for use in clean and green technologies, increasing energy efficiencies, working in improvising or improving digital economy. And again, these are the areas where our two countries actually has huge opportunities to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay. Nick, turning to you. Both Manisha and Ajay also referred to the fact that the two countries are working together. They're going to be public and private partnership. Manisha touched on regulatory frameworks, but I'd like to put you on the spot and ask you, as one of the companies which, for whom AI is important, and I'm reminded of this every time I pick up my phone and I open the Google app and I type in something, the very first response comes from AI before I scroll down to the other responses. So how do you see regulatory frameworks evolving in both India and the US? And what challenges do you, as somebody who's sort of previously at Yale and now at Google, sort of see some of the challenges private sector is going to encounter as governments try to sort of ensure that there are regulatory frameworks, governing something which we still don't fully understand its capabilities and the extent to which it can help us?
Yeah, thank you, Aparna. It's a great question, and I'm really happy to be here today with Hudson and USIBC on to discuss these kinds of issues. I think when we talk about regulatory frameworks, Google has been out there for quite a while saying that AI is too important not to regulate, but also too important not to regulate well. And I think sometimes when people think about AI regulation, they go very quickly to what is this sort of foolproof regulatory framework that we can somehow build to account for all harms, to account for all risks, and to address all vulnerabilities around AI. I think that's sort of what we've seen in the EU over the last few years. And I think there's also been sort of a reckoning, even in the last few months, on whether that is the right approach. We saw this really interesting report come out from Mario Draghi, the former Italian prime minister, who was commissioned by European Commission President von der Leyen to assess what the EU had done well and where it was struggling in terms of building out a strong tech-driven economy. And one of the findings on that report was that innovative companies that want to scale up in Europe are hindered at every stage by inconsistent and restrictive regulations. So I think it's a really important moment for the US and India to step up and say, like, there's a different path forward on this. Regulation is important, and we should be thinking about ways to address the security and safety and other harms associated with AI, but you can't do that in a vacuum. You can't solely approach AI or any other frontier technology purely through the lens of addressing risk. You also need to think about, as Ajay pointed out earlier, sort of what's the affirmative framework? What's the workforce needs? What are the skilling needs? What are the infrastructure needs? How do you get access to GPUs? How do you build compute capacity? How do you build infrastructure? How do you build subsea cables so that AI works across borders effectively? I think those are all the questions where the US and India have a lot to say to the world, frankly, about a better path forward for how we can think about governing and regulating AI, not just to address these risks, but also to unlock new kinds of opportunities. So if there's one message I think that we can sort of take away from today, it's that you need to have a broader vision around regulation that isn't just about sort of the immediate sort of harms being addressed, but it points us forward towards a future where there's economic growth, there is productivity, there are other gains from AI that we can drive together and build infrastructure together around as well.
Thanks, Nick. Arthur, as the historian and as somebody who analyzes the confluence of technology and strategy, how do you see, sort of AI and, its growth and, US and India working together? Sort of, you worked on Japan, you worked on several countries. You also worked on sort of Scots and the Vikings. So I'm going to put you on the spot today and ask you, how do you see AI, but from a 20 or 40,000 feet level? How do you see this relationship growing, and how do you see AI playing a role in this partnership?
Yeah, that's the perspective that I'm bringing comes from multiple levels, right? One is that since my time here at Hudson, I have been working on tech cooperation between the US and allies, with Japan, a lot on Japan, South Korea, with the Five Eyes, members of the intelligence network like Canada and Great Britain. And in all of those cases, I like to suggest, when I give advice to those who are looking for the cooperation, is to think about this in a transactional way. In other words, what is it that you bring, I can say to my Japanese audience, to my South Korean audience, to my Canadian, what is it you bring the US needs in this particular technological field? What are the areas where the US is clearly ahead or clearly advancing, but and in which you may have something to contribute, but which will not be as essential as what you can contribute from that's missing from the US tech playbook. And I think that applies in the case of India too. But I want to say, in the case of tech cooperation with India, it's a little different, because I think, and I am firmly convinced, India is on path to become the third superpower. Aparna, you and I have written a piece on the Hill talking about the implications of that as India becomes not only the most populous nation on earth, but also the second or third most powerful economy in the world. And what this means is it's going to change everything. The rise of India changes everything. It changes the global balance of power strategically and also economically. And so how the US and India now cooperate in the high-tech areas, not just in AI, is crucial, because how that cooperation takes place is going to have a global impact. Now, in the case of AI, and I'm going to broaden the aperture a little bit here in terms of what I'm going to talk about in terms of the cooperation with regard to AI. In terms of AI, where I see India having enormous ability to help the US where it lags, is not so much in the area of generative AI, although they can help. I think India can help to sort of shape the debate about where is generative AI going, where is AI as a technology going. But I see India as being able to, in the place where the US needs a lot of help, is in the area of industrial AI, of the use of AI as a means by which to advance economic processes, manufacturing processes. There's a lot of territory to be taken up here where the US needs help. We just finished having a dock strike on the East Coast. And that dock strike, the main issue there remains unresolved, which isn't about pay, but it's the perceived threat of automation, and that includes AI. There is enormous fear about the way in which AI and automation will be a job killer, will be an industry a disruptor here. I think in the case of for India, this is an opportunity to talk about, no, through AI and automation, it becomes a job multiplier. There's ways in which these can advance our economic fortunes for both countries by working together in the AI sphere. The second area I'm going to mention briefly is in the area of space, and in terms of US and India cooperation in space. I don't think a lot of Americans realize just how far advanced India really is in the space area. They're one of the 4 countries, after all, who've conducted a lunar landing. A lot of Americans don't realize that, along with us, the Chinese, and the Russians. And they did it at a cost savings, which has been just incredible, the degree in which they put that together. India is on track by 2030 to add up to 10% of the global space economy. That's where they're going. That's where they're headed here. What the ISRO has done, what they've been able to accomplish here in terms of a partnership between government and industry, what the New Space India Limited has done in terms of bringing in the private sector here and making them part of a larger national but also global mission. There's what, 400 companies, private space companies in India operating now and working together here. This is an incredible story, but it's also one in which I think India, and I'll say this is also true, I think, of Japan, the government understands how important that partnership really is, and the way in which working together with commercial industry and working with government together and harnessing the energies and the drive of both can really advance a technology in powerful ways. The United States government's still learning about this. You know, we had in space, we had the first mover disadvantage. And that is that we still think about space exploration and space industry the way we pioneered it in the 1960s and in the 1970s and 1980s here. We've moved on. The world has moved on now, and India can point that way. The last one I'm going to mention really quickly, which I know a fair amount about as well, is in the area of quantum technology. And here, what I would suggest in terms of it, looking at the way in which India's quantum industry and work has been advancing just in the last few years, is to again think about where could the US need help? Where is that direction going? Just recently, just this month, India's national quantum movement released its plan. National Quantum Mission released its plan with 4 hubs of quantum technology advances. And they're the ones that a lot of other countries are: quantum computing, quantum communications, quantum sensing, and quantum materials. All very important. But there's nothing extraordinary about that. There's nothing that other countries aren't already doing and going in direction is. The place where America needs help in quantum technology is in quantum security, is in developing the power of quantum-enabled technologies to provide for hack-proof, user-safe networks and data protection here. And there are companies already in India. I can think of one, QNew Labs. It's a great example of a company that's working on the technologies to provide that kind of networks. They're already working with the Indian government and also with the Ministry of Defense in providing that kind of support and work here. The United States lags far behind in this aspect of quantum technology and what is happening here. And then, if you mix in, both in the space sector and in the quantum sector, cooperation in AI and the developments and how they can accelerate developments in all of these things, I think the horizons are almost limitless of what can take place with a US-India cooperation here. If we think about it, not just in terms of AI, but in the broader picture of how US and India high-tech cooperation is going to change the world. And I'm fairly convinced that that's what's going to happen.
Thanks, Arthur. So we've talked a lot about the opportunities. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges or concerns people have. Manisha, I'll come back to you. And Amy touched on this in her remarks in the beginning. As AI becomes a bigger part of our life, personal life, professional, business operations, industry, what ethical challenges arise? And how do you think India and the US are or should be looking at some of the ethical concerns and challenges which we are facing and will face as AI grows more important?
Well, Aparna, I think that's a great question, and I think that's another area where the United States and India are poised for real cooperation. And I'm going to throw in another party who hasn't been mentioned yet, but that's the country of China. Because when it comes to technology and sort of ethics, privacy, everything that you've mentioned, the broad array of safeguards that we should be thinking about, I think that both regulators in the US and India are thinking about them. As I mentioned before, I've seen specifically that senior Indian government officials have mentioned that they want to create a system that is safe, secure, and trustworthy without hampering innovation. And I can tell you that language, that precise language, has been used by US regulators as well. Not just the executive branch, but members of Congress. Members in the United States Senate and in the United States House have all tried to better educate themselves. I was very impressed by the fact that Majority Leader Senator Chuck Schumer convened a series of AI briefings. And he invited the names like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Sundar Pichai, I mean, the real tech titans, to come in and voluntarily brief members on what artificial intelligence could mean. So they've at least tried to gain a substantive understanding of a very complicated area before they try to regulate it. And I think wrapped within that sort of regulatory framework and understanding what AI means is inherently wrapped within that is the ethical considerations. You know, similarly in India, Ajay mentioned the AI portal. We've taken a look at that. Similar themes. How do we create a safe, secure, and trustworthy system while not hampering innovation? So I think the US and India are really poised to set the global standards of how we can do this in a way that benefits society and minimizes any potential harm. The counter to that is the Chinese government, the PRC, which we should be watching which both the Indian government and the US government should be watching very carefully, because Chinese development of artificial intelligence is not going to have those same safeguards. You know, in China, there's not a human rights component. There is no privacy. So they are willing to move forward and progress on artificial intelligence at the expense of society, at the expense of global security. I think both U.S. and Indian intellectual property would be at risk, you know, when dealing with Chinese entities. So there's a lot we need to think about together in terms of moving forward on a safe basis and watching the other malign actors in the world who we know are going to use artificial intelligence in their defense and military capabilities against democracies like the U.S. and India.
Thanks, Manisha. Ajay, I'd like you to sort of also sort of, you know, answer this question about the ethical challenges. But to that, I'll add, you know, how do you see, you know, businesses and governments, both in India and US, working to ensure not just that we keep ethical considerations in mind, but security and data privacy? You touched on this a little bit, but I'd like you to elaborate a little more if you can.
Absolutely. Aparna, thank you for this question also. Basically, as India is currently following its AI mission, we have kept the government and private sector as a close collaborator in this entire process, because we know that government in India knows that the technology is with the private sector at this moment. And we really need to use this technology to actually develop those AI tools, AI applications. And for that, of course, we need to actually support as a government to actually how we can actually pool together private sector in our effort to actually address to some of the major challenges of our people, basically. The developmental challenges, the challenges relating to healthcare, challenges relating to delivering some of the government services to people, basically, when it comes to literacy programs, when it comes to even so many other programs and tools for supporting farmers, like how farmers can have some of those application tools when they can actually know that when exactly a crop is going to get infested with various diseases and pests, when exactly they need to apply the water. So because all of these resources are so much scarce, basically. So that said, the working with the private sector is a critical component in our effort to in our effort as part of India's AI mission. When we are working with private sector on developing the compute capacity, to develop the foundational model, to develop the data sets, even we are working with private sector, government, private sector working together to even develop the data sets, basically. We know that there is so much data available in India, but it is not readily available for use for AI applications, basically. So we have to use all this data which is available to put it in such a manner, put it as a data set which can be then used by the private sector for delivering some of the services for the people. Like we have developed this in digital economy. We have already developed this this India stack, we call it basically, by which a number of private banks, they have developed a number of financial tools to actually see how we can actually have greater financial inclusion for our people, how we can actually deliver some of the government benefits to the people. And again, all this is done while keeping in mind that the people's data privacy is kept at the top, basically. How people's data should not be compromised. So that's how, and we have no such case so far while using so much of data when it comes to our Aadhaar card data, so many other things, DigiLocker data and all, basically. So I think as our colleague from Google also, we are working very closely with Google to develop the AI-related infrastructure or ecosystem in India. And not only Google, many other companies basically. So I think the way technology is transforming, we all really need to actually use whatever resources we have available. And as Arthur rightly said that if we actually see the interface of AI applications with space and quantum, the opportunities are unlimited. While opportunities are unlimited, the challenges are also like enormous, basically. So we all really need to converge our synergies, basically, to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, I'm going to again put you on the spot. AI does bring ethical, moral, cyber security, all of those issues, data privacy. All one has to do is just search for, AI deepfakes. We have elections, about 54 elections this year, and the concerns countries have had and continue to have. You're searching for an answer to a question and people say, well, you may get the wrong question, depends on what you put into the algorithm. So coming back to one of the companies which is deep into this, how does Google look at the ethical and moral concerns, the cybersecurity? And Manisha mentioned the fact that there's one big actor, China, which is not really doing much to ensure the ethical, moral, or cybersecurity challenges which we face. Over to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do think in the same way that we need to focus on opportunity, AI does provide immense opportunity for cybersecurity in particular. And this is an area where we really do need to ensure that those who are defending and protecting critical infrastructure have the same tools and better tools available than those who are trying to attack that infrastructure. So I think that's one challenge sometimes, which is that the malicious actors are often the first to get access to the best-in-class tools. So ensuring that government actors and others who are charged with protecting and securing that infrastructure have access to the best-in-class AI tools, which are increasingly important to defending against different kinds of cyber attacks online. You actually do need not just smart data-minded people, but people who can put together data from different buckets and really harness AI to accomplish that effectively if you're going to effectively defend infrastructure in the modern world. And I think this actually gets back to a point that Arthur was making earlier about the need for an alliance between the US and India that draws upon each of our strengths. I agree that the US is at the lead in terms of developing generative AI models. Google is investing heavily in quantum computing. We actually have Fab in Santa Barbara that's been developing some remarkable proof of concepts around quantum computing at this point. But we do need, I think India has a huge role to play in this area. We saw an interview from Minister Vaishnaw last week where he said that India has the opportunity to become the AI application service provider to the world. And I think this is an area, whether it's trying to figure out how to ensure that quantum is secure, trying to ensure that as we build new technologies around health. Yesterday, Google won the Nobel Prize for our AlphaFold 2 system, which is a really innovative way to understand proteins and how they play into different kinds of health interventions. But we're developing the system to assess this, but you need scientists around the world, and India is actually the home of many of those scientists who are currently working on trying to make the AlphaFold concept a reality and trying to use it to tackle cures around malaria, cures around cancer. This kind of partnership is essential. And even getting back to the early days of AI, of generative AI, in 2017, when we developed a paper called "Attention is All You Need," that was sort of the birth of the modern transformer model. That was a collaboration with researchers from around the world. An Indian researcher had a very prominent role in that paper, along with somebody from Ukraine, somebody from Wales. And so this, I think, just shows the need to ensure that as we think about building alliances in this space, that we are tethering them towards these new kinds of opportunities. I would say too, on the sort of economic side of things, Google is investing heavily in skilling in India. We are committed to training 10 million people on AI literacy and AI skills in India. This can't just be a Google effort. It needs to be a partnership across industry, and we're working very closely with many Indian workforce groups in this area and other companies. But this needs to be scaled up in partnership with the government of India, in partnership with the US, to ensure that we are really accounting for the need to build a workforce of the future. Again, to Arthur's point earlier, the industrial applications of AI are the most important, I think. And that's probably where US is most behind China right now. We are definitely in the lead on developing the models themselves, but in harnessing them, deploying them, and diffusing them across different sectors, whether it's manufacturing or agriculture. This is an area where I think India can play a hugely important role in providing a guidepost forward for how to harness and appropriately use AI in those kinds of contexts. Of course, there's big questions about job displacement that come from that. And that's, I think, another area where you need to be thinking about partnerships across industry and with governments to ensure that the people have the skills they need to really use these technologies in a new kind of way.
Thanks. Arthur, the question I'm going to ask you is slightly different. Based on your work on Japan and the Five Eyes and the other partnerships where US has built really strong economic and tech partnership, what is something you would recommend US and India do to build the India-US AI and tech partnership? What are some of the lessons you saw there, lessons learned, and paths to avoid?
Well, what I would say is I'm glad we brought China into the discussion, because what we've seen with China, where that is going, is, shall we say, the dark side of what AI and how governments can envision where AI can go. This summer, I published a long piece in Commentary Magazine on China's AI strategy, and where they see AI going as part of China's bid for global hegemony. And if you're worried about AI as a technology, or it scares you, wait till you find out what the Chinese have in mind and where they're going with it, both in terms of its military applications, in terms of its total surveillance model for control of its populations. It's how it's being used in biotech as well, and even in cognitive warfare. All of these things are very scary. And what we know is that for China, this has become also an export industry of getting other governments involved in, hey, this is ways in which you can control your population. Your power will be perpetual by being able to use these tools, the AI tools that we've set in motion, that we can provide for you here. So what I'm seeing taking place now is the development of two opposing models of where AI in the future lies. One, which is the Chinese model, is based on how do we control populations? How do we exercise power to the nth degree to really reshape not only the population of our own country, but also the future of humanity with Chinese characteristics. That's on one side. On the other would be a model in which an AI future which is about enhancing human dignity and human freedom, which is about protecting the rights of individuals, as well as expanding economic prosperity and economic growth for as wide a part of humanity and population as possible here. And that's where I see companies like Google pointing in that direction here and being able to harness that kind of technical expertise and scientific expertise. But I think it's also one in which the US and India can work together to explain the framework for such a paradigm. AI for freedom. What is that going to look like? How is that going to take shape? What are the steps that are involved with it? India is a great team player when it comes to international standards of the use of technology, of the developments for the future. And so I see the AI cooperation between US and India as one that can, as I think all the panelists agree, can focus on the ethical aspects of this and focus on the moral as well as the strategic and the economic dimension to how AI is going to shape our future.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask each of the panelists to take about 60 seconds and give me any final thoughts, remarks, provocative statements, disagreements with Arthur that you'd like to, before we conclude this. I'll start with Manisha.
Well, Aparna, thank you so much. I wish I could disagree with something that one of the panelists said, because I know that makes for a more lively conversation. But I mean, honestly, I think that everybody provided an interesting point of view on AI. And I very much agree with Arthur's comments about the unique opportunity here for the US and India to collaborate. I think that this is going to be a defining moment. You know, as I mentioned, this year, we've really seen an uptick in public knowledge in regulatory aspects of artificial intelligence. I think 2025 is going to be a more creative year. We're going to learn how and where AI can be used to benefit society. The challenge is going to be managing the anxiety around it. There are a lot of people that think that artificial intelligence is going to create machine learning and those machines are going to be able to take over and do more thinking than we can. So I think in this next year, the challenge that I would set out for both the public and the private sector is to think about how we can harness AI to enhance and make our lives better. You know, there are ways in which we can just improve processes, whether it's healthcare or energy, you know, all of the things, all the societal challenges right now, we can use AI to improve while also managing the side that people are concerned about, the security, the privacy, and just frankly, you know, robots taking over the world. We need to tell people it's not going to happen.
Ajay?
Thank you, Aparna. So from my perspective, I think as I see that, as my Prime Minister says that it's a time of America and India, as he describes the AI, basically. And how I see that basically it's a opportunity, the tremendous opportunity for our businesses, our two countries to actually create economic opportunities for our people, how we can actually use AI applications which are actually deployed for responsible and socially equitable applications for the people, basically. Not only between our two countries, but whatever applications are being developed by our private sector, by our governments together, they can be used in other parts of the world for the betterment of the people at large, basically. Thank you.
Nick?
I think the one thing I would draw from this conversation and a path to take it forward would be how do we conceptualize a government-to-government and private sector partnership between US and India that really builds a vision that we can project to the rest of the world effectively around how we are already working together, sometimes very quietly, sometimes publicly, on a variety of economic and security partnerships around AI and other frontier technologies like quantum computing. And how do you take that vision to the rest of the world? Like, what is the sort of format for building a new kind of US-India alliance around advanced technologies? And I think we have a lot to say at this point, even early in development of AI, about how the framework that US and India are working on, which isn't always sort of coherently described publicly, but we can do more of that. We can say how a policy environment needs to be connected to an infrastructure investment environment, to a skilling and a workforce and education environment that allows everybody to benefit from AI in a positive kind of way. I think the world is looking for that kind of leadership right now, and I'm not sure that it is really getting it from anybody in particular. So I think it's a real opportunity going forward between our two countries.
Thank you. Arthur, you get the last word.
If I had one word advice to American policymakers, I would say don't underestimate the value of working and cooperating with India in the area of AI in terms of not just its positive impact on the economic and national security of both countries, but on the global economy as a whole. If I give advice to Indian policymakers, I would say don't overestimate the degree to which US understands how important cooperation with India is. American policymakers need a lot of help in understanding and education in that as they move forward.
Thank you. I'd like to thank USIBC once again and Amy for co-hosting the event. I'd like to thank all the panelists, Manisha, Ajay, Nick, and Arthur. And sort of this wraps up, but hopefully we can do more such events with USIBC and all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.